Any reason why you thought that, now you've done your time and now you want to do something else?
Yeah, a lot of civil servants constantly flirt with the idea of doing development work. Like, yeah, ye nahi karna, let's join the development sector. For me, that just like anybody else, constant flirting with the thought development sector. And it was just, I think, coincidence or fortuitous that I was finishing 21 years, because when you finish 20 years, you're eligible for a pension, right? And I got approached by a headhunter for a quite senior position in a very reputable not-for-profit. So it kind of circumstantially, it was not planned. It was coincidental, it was organic, and the time was right. Right? So I'm like, why not?
Help our audience understand what's happening in the microfinance space in India a little bit. Help me also understand, because I have very little knowledge about it.
Okay, so the microfinance space is basically defined in terms of household income. So if you are at a particular level of household income in rural India and in urban India, you're eligible for a microfinance loan.
Correct.
Right? And it's a very small ticket size. Like if my household income, I don't remember what it is now, it used to be, but if my household income in rural India is about, let us say, a lakh or a lakh and a half, and in urban India 2 lakhs a year, I'm eligible for a microfinance loan.
Yeah.
The microfinance ticket sizes are typically small. It can go up to a lakh, starts at about 40. Nobody straight away gives a lakh, because you graduate your customers up the business and then give them more loans. There are two things happening here which I think a lot of people don't appreciate or understand. Almost 99% borrowers are women, right? So whereas, some of the women, of course, may give it to their husbands or whoever is the actual business person in the house, there are a lot of women who are doing their own business.
Yeah.
They start their own businesses, they do computer training, they do beauty parlor work, they do tailoring, they run flower shops, they run just outside their houses, little kirana shops, they're doing stuff, right? And so when I go into conversations where, you have a lot of people who say, oh, we need senior business women to mentor our young, entrepreneurs who are coming onto the scene. And I tell them, do you know that there are 4.2 crore women in this country who are not lettered, who have very little numeracy, running their own businesses, right? Because what microfinance has done is given them access to finance.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
And there's a lot of criticism around the microfinance sector, the very high rates of interest, etc. There's a need to understand that we pay much more interest on our credit card bills, right? These women have never had access to finance. You're providing them access to finance. To somebody with a low base to pay back, they don't really care. So it's you and I, with our understanding of rates of interest, with the very high rates of interest. For them, the fact that they now have access to unsecured loans is a big deal.
Okay.
And each and every woman that gets a loan is, registered on the credit bureau. They have credit histories, right? And what happens typically is, and if you've seen the the microfinance sector, the NPAs traditionally have all been below 1%.
Wow.
Which means that these women value that money and pay back.
Correct.
Right? So, and the fact is, they are unlettered, but they intuitively pick up numeracy. They are very good with understanding क्या मेरा लोन साइज है, मुझे कितना वापस करना है, एक महीने में करना है, एक हफ्ते में करना है, and they pay back because they want to take the next loan, right? If I have had no access to credit, I obviously value credit. And the other point I was trying to make is, people talk about very high interest rates. The fact remains that the rate of borrowing is quite high. For a typical microfinance organization, if you're really big, you might get it at 12%. But if you're a smaller one, you will even get it as high as 20%. And I don't know whether things have changed now, but I remember when I was there, it was either whatever is your rate of borrowing plus 10% or 26%, whichever was lower.
Okay.
Right? And then out of that, the actual profit, because after all your OPEX and everything, because it's a very people intensive business. It's a feet on street model, you know, and it's a door to door model, and the connect with the end customer is extremely high touch, right? Because a lot of them are unlettered, so they want to understand, they want to engage, they're happy if you come to a particular place for them to make it convenient for them to come and pay back. They're unlettered, they are completely uncomfortable going into a formal bank setup, right?
Yeah.
So this feet on street model, it's a very high touch model, and so the costs are high. So your OPEX, for instance, is very high. So your actual profit that you're likely to make is about 1%, and really high is about 1.5%. So, you know, to stand back and say very high rates of, you have to understand the business model first, right? And in the past, of course, there was a kind of ceiling on the kind of interests that could be levied. But today, I think the Reserve Bank has made up, you know, a level playing field.
Right.
But what happens with the level playing field is not that everybody goes back and starts charging very high rates of interest. It all disrupts and bounces into a plausible, doable rate of interest, because you want your customers to pay you back, right?
Right. And that ecosystem is flourishing in India? In your opinion?
Absolutely. It is, I think, you know, it services that segment of the population where banks can't lend because they are unsecured loans.
Right.
And also, the, you know, the fuzzy segment, like the MSME segment, when they start, like if you need a loan up to, let us say, about 5 lakhs. So because typically banks don't want to engage in very high transaction burden, and also fuzzy collateral. So not an easy space. But then now you also have the small finance banks whose mandate is to engage with the marginalized sectors, and 75% of their lending has to be those sectors. So yes.
Any quick turnaround story from that space that you can think of, where, you know, people who actually needed that help got that help and they made a living for themselves?
Oh, plenty. I mean, I'm talking about 4.2 crore women.
Correct.
Any woman you go to, you know, it's surprising. I went to Dharavi, right? And I went into households where women were had been borrowing.
Right.
And I was thinking, these are conservative people. Would they have done it themselves, or would they have given it to their husband? You will be surprised at the number of women who are doing their own business. So this very interesting lady, I said, so do you enjoy doing it? Thoroughly, I enjoy doing this. I said, do you give any money to your husband? Why should I? He runs an auto, that's his business.
Right.
This is my business. I think what it gave women see, a lot of times women don't have a place at the table. The moment you bring in some money, you know, and I have no evidence to this, it's more anecdotal experience. They do get a voice. They do get a voice.
Right.
You know, because there is money that is being brought. Right.
I absolutely agree with you on that point, because I've seen that in my personal life.